It's finally here. Welcome to the Miracle Zone. More than a podcast, this is a sacred space for visionary leaders and heart-centered entrepreneurs who are ready to take off the masks, set aside the roles, and step into the raw, magical truth of what it actually means to lead in these transformational times. More than just building a business and a brand, you know that you're also here to share your medicine, lead a movement, and leave a legacy. If you've been craving next level conversations to get you to your next level, conversations that blend bold leadership, intuitive wisdom, and a touch of the miraculous, then you're in the right place. Because around here, we don't do things in a linear way. Whether you're already running a thriving business, leading a dream team, and impacting millions, or you're still on your way there, here we'll break free from the old ways of doing things and step into a multidimensional way of creating and leadership. Because in the Miracle Zone, we explore the intersection of business, leadership, and frequency. It's where strategy meets soul, and where visionary ideas become reality. And they happen in a snap. I'm Katarina, your host, guide, and bridge between the practical and the mystical in life and business. I'll share insights, channeled guidance, and heart-opening stories from pioneering leaders like you who are living at the edge and reshaping the way that we lead in this new world. So if you're ready to tap into your miracle frequency, to embrace the heart-led leadership that changes everything, then join me. Because this, my love, this is the Miracle Zone. I ask, I see, I know, I trust, I be. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Miracle Zone podcast, where business, leadership, and frequency align. And today I'm diving into something that's so essential and connected to being in the Miracle Zone. We're going to talk about receptivity and receptive leadership and what that looks like in our business. And I'm going to share some of my crazy stories and why it even matters to cultivate this quality and why it looks really different than what we often see it being described as or portrayed as in this context of feminine leadership, because I think it goes so much more beyond feminine leadership and the conversation that we've been having around it and how we envisage it to look like and feel like in our lives and how we lead and in our businesses. So let's start with receptivity and what actually it is. And in many ways, receptivity is an openness, an openness. And this is why it's so connected to being in the miracle zone, because what are we open to? We're open for the miracles to drop in. And this can look like many different things, right? We can be receptive and open to receiving money. We can be receptive and open to receiving clients. We can be receptive and open to receiving opportunities and collaborations. We can be receptive and open to receiving inspiration and ideas. We can be receptive and open to receiving so many things, right? And so I like to clump those all together. And I'm not going to go into the details of different types right now, right? But I want to talk about the concept of receptivity in general and how we work with it and how we lead. And specifically by we, I'm going to talk about me because it looks a little different. And I think when people ask me, they see me and they really feel like there's like long hair and it's just la, 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 I'm so receptive. But there's a whole other side. There's a whole other side. And I really want to talk about that and give you really practical examples of what that is. And the reason I really want to talk about that is because May is just around the corner. And May around these parts, in case you're new to these parts, is Miracle May. And so in May, we're going to be just focusing on miracles, 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 and calling them in. And we need to lay the foundation, right? And so starting with this receptivity is so, so important. The beautiful thing about Miracle May is that it's just beautifully aligned into us going into Taurus season. So my sun is in Taurus. I'm just elated. I just want to be in receptive energy as soon as we shift into this beautiful Taurian energy. And also Venus is going direct. And there's just going to be this beautiful Venus is going to be back in Aries, and there's just going to be this a bit of this fire too, right? This fire, which I think is really essential as well to the concept of receptivity. So I think you can hear it in my voice that I'm really riled up about this topic and excited to dive in today. And part of it is also embodying being in this receptive state, right? So there is no big pre-scripted point by point that I'm going to go through. There's no AI outline that I'm following right now. I'm feeling called to speak about this topic and to share some stories. And I feel just in the opening the space to explore this already, the ideas are coming through, the inspiration is coming through, new things that even I didn't see before I sat down to explore this topic. So I'm really excited to jump in. I've already talked about what receptivity is in terms of this openness, right? And this openness requires space, right? Mental space, emotional space, energetic space, sensuals, the senses, body, physical space to really be a vessel, right? Because a lot of times in our business, it's really easy to be in creator mode. Creator mode. That's what so many of us are doing. We are constantly creating, and that's beautiful. And there's a bit of a difference between being in creator mode and being in vessel mode. Obviously, we need both. And when we have both, then we're in co-creator mode. We're both creating and we're receiving. And it's this beautiful, I'm doing a little dance. If you're not watching this on YouTube, if you're just listening, I'm doing this little dance. It's like, in the blender of this, both the receptivity and being in this vessel energy, and then this creator energy that we have. And we've talked about this creator energy quite a bit on previous podcasts. And I think we haven't done the receptive aspect as much justice, right? And I want to start by looking at why is that even important? Obviously, we want to be open to receive all the things. Yay! All right. And that's the being in the miracle zone. And that's why we're creating space to be in the miracle zone, because we need the space to be there. Because when we're busy and occupied and doing all of the things, then how can we be in that openness and receptivity for everything to come in? Right. So this is why, and you can check it out in the links in my Miracle Business Blueprint. I actually lay out this 7-part framework that supports you to be in your miracle zone as you're leading your business. And so much of that is about creating space to be in your miracle zone. And that's a lot of what the framework is about. So you can check that out if you want to look at some of the practicals of like, how do I am actually creating the space, right? But assuming that we are all on board that yes, receptivity is important. Yes, this is where we open to receive all the things. And yes, that requires space. Then we look at, okay, why is that benefiting in terms of leadership, right? And the big benefit is when we are in that receptive space, that heart open space, the miracles are popping in, they're dropping in, all of the things, the opportunity, the money, the clients, the inspiration. It's also a space of being open and connected. And so that's really important as well. And being receptive, for example, if you are being open to support and receiving support from your team, receiving ideas from your team, co-creating with your team, right? It's a space of collaboration and connection as well. And it's also a space of innovation, right? This is where new things come through because we are open for something different to come through than what we already know, right? And so it's also this beautiful space of, I'm doing the whole dance again, of innovation and collaboration, all the things mixed together. When I'm in this receptive state, I'm a very somatic. It's all happening in my body. And this is all beautiful and sounds lovely, right? Who doesn't want all of this? Who doesn't want all of this? The other thing is nourishment, because when we're receptive, then we can be tuned into our intuition and be more aligned and do things in a more nourishing way. And this keeps us, for example, from getting to that point of burnout or complete misalignment or being in full resistance to things too. So that's another reason why we want to be in this beautiful receptive state. Now, here's where it gets a little uncomfortable, right? And it's not to say that everything I've mentioned isn't already a little uncomfortable, because obviously when we're open, we're vulnerable. When we're a vessel, we're not in full control. Part of it is letting go of that control. So there's a vulnerability there. It's already a little uncomfortable. Now, where it gets really uncomfortable, and this is the aspect of receptivity that I don't see a lot of people talking about, is that when we are open to receive, it's not just a passive listening, right? Because we're going to hear things and then we need to do something about what we hear. And so it is a place of being in presence. It is a place of being in beingness. And still, we're going to get inputs. And what are we doing with those inputs? How are we integrating? How are we dancing with them? How are we listening to them? How are we acting? Right? Because we're actively listening. We're not just like laying there, I'm receiving, right? This is the fine distinction. The fine distinction is that when we are a vessel and when we are receptive, we are open not just to the inputs that are coming into us from different places, but we're also receptive and open to being moved. And this is why receptivity is so closely linked to surrender. Because in order to be truly receptive, we also need to be surrendered enough to let ourselves be moved, right? To let ourselves be moved in response to what we are receiving. So I want to share a story here just to make this all more tangible and practical. And one of the ways that I receive is, again, my sun is in Taurus, is I receive a lot of input from the great mother and from earth, from her, from earth. And so this is one of the reasons that I connect with and that I work with the miracle frequency, because for me, the miracle frequency is the great Ma frequency, this primordial mother frequency, right? This primordial creator, creatress frequency. And so one of the easiest ways to connect with the miracle frequency is to connect with the earth directly. And so I have a very close relationship and conversation constantly with the earth and with the elements. And so a lot of times when I'm receiving things, receiving information, receiving input, it's coming from the physical world around me and from the earth. And I want to share. So, of course, not everyone is receiving in the same ways. And this is why it's also really important to know yourself, right? So, I am a generator in human design. I'm a 2/4 emotional generator. And so for me, things are happening in my physical reality and showing me things. The world is speaking to me very, very practically in a way that I can see and receive and get the messages, right? So this is important context for you. It can look very different for you. But for me, it's very much in my physical world, in my physical reality, and often connected to the earth. So to give you an example, 3 years ago, I moved into this house that I'm currently living in, and I started getting some interesting visitors. And I want to share this story with you because it's very connected to how I ended up in Egypt a year ago. And it has to do with these visitors that were coming to visit me in my house. So, who were these visitors? I believe it began with my son first. He showed up and had something in his little hand that he wanted to show me. And he opened his hand up, and I was like, wow. In his little hand was a humongous beetle, a humongous beetle. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I haven't seen those around ever at all. And so here he came and he showed me this beetle. And then a couple days in a row, this beetle, it wasn't the same one. As these different beetles kept appearing, and there were huge beetles. And I know enough to just pay attention when beautiful creatures, when the Great Mother sends me beautiful creatures, to get curious and pay attention about what's going on. And so I just started noticing these beautiful, curious creatures that were appearing. And it was around this time of year, I believe. Yeah, it was around this time of year that this started happening 3 years ago. And so these beetles started appearing. And I was like, what? Okay, what's happening? What is this? And so I just sat down and I just closed my eyes and I just tuned in and just asked, what are these beetles? What's going on? And immediately I heard ISIS. And that was very interesting for me because I hadn't really connected with that frequency consciously, obviously, subconsciously, obviously, in past lives. I think a lot of us in these spaces have worked with the priestessing arts in many different ways, shapes, or forms. And so it's not surprising that that is there, right? But I just hadn't connected to that in a conscious way yet. And I was getting ready to lead my miracle frequency immersion, which I do every May and which is coming up in May. And a lot of that is working with the miracle frequency in the embodiment of that. And it works a lot with different guides that I call Miracle Council. And a lot of that for me at the time was working very, very closely with Mother Mary as the primary keeper of the miracle frequency and the miracle council, and then others coming in to support us in really embodying and working with the miracle frequency. And what was so funny and so interesting was as I was starting to get ready to pull together this next round of the miracle frequency immersion, these beetles started appearing. And Isis was just making her appearance known through these beetles that were coming through. And so I sat down and I worked with light language, and I write it and I sound it and I let it come through. And that's how I see what am I working with, because we obviously need to be discerning about what energies are coming through or what we're channeling or what's showing up in our space. When we're a vessel, we need to be discerning. We can't just let anything come through, right? And so I was in this curiosity of, okay, what is this? And I heard Isis, and I said, okay, let me just create space to explore and feel into it into alignment and how I want to work with this energy. Again, discernment, super important. And so I created the space and I did a light language transmission, and a song started coming through, a beautiful song. And so I grabbed my drum and I started hearing it. And I started chanting this beautiful song that was coming through. And it was just over and over, awaken people of the sun, that was coming through. Awaken people of the sun. Awaken people of the sun. And now I want my drum, but it's in the other room. So you're just going to get that. And so I'm just allowing the frequency to move through and the message to come through that wants to come through and the transmission to come through. And in that moment, that was when I was like, oh, I can't be working with the miracle frequency and the miracle council and not incorporate this Isis transmission that's wanting to come through. Isis as the magician amongst many things, right? How are we talking about miracles and how are we working with this without allowing this to come through? And so that was very much okay, what is coming through? What is being shown? What is the great mother showing me? Can I listen? What is happening? And how do I work with it? And the thing is, when that we're receptive, we're also allowing ourselves to be moved by certain energies, right? And so, interestingly, what happened later that year, and this was on 11/11 in November, so a long time from April. Why would there even be any beetles around that time of year? I don't know. But nevertheless, a beautiful beetle, a scarab beetle, showed up in November. And I was like, what? What is this? What is this? And again, created some space to listen. And this one was really curious because my cat actually brought it in. My cat brought in this huge beetle and placed it in front of my bed. And so I wake up in the morning and I'm getting ready to step out of bed and there's beetle there. And I'm like, wait, what is happening here? Again, 11/11. Create some space to listen. And I got very clear guidance to reach out to somebody. And it was to Asha Ramakrishna, who will be on this podcast very, very soon, to reach out to her about joining her on a pilgrimage to Egypt. I did not know if she did these. I had zero idea if she led pilgrimages, there. I knew of her and I had connected with her very, very briefly years before. But I also know at least 5 other people who lead these kind of pilgrimages specifically there that I could have reached out to. I knew very much more closely. But no, it was very clear as the name and the directive of this person asked them this question. And so I did. I reached out to her and I was like, hi, by the way, are you leading these pilgrimages? And she was. And so even before she started promoting that she was doing another one, I said, I'm in whenever this is happening. I'm in. And we did a beautiful conversation and there was lots of resonance. And we immediately felt, okay, why I was called to reach out to her for this. Anyways, all this to say that when we are receptive, we will receive. First of all, we need to be receptive enough to listen actively and get curious, and then listen deeper for what the message is, and then be receptive enough to allow ourselves to be moved in action, not just in action, but in action. Allow ourselves to be receptive enough to be moved into an action of doing a thing that makes zero sense. And this is why receptivity can feel really uncomfortable. It's not just this, this like feminine receiving, right? Because there's this stillness and listening that we need to do, which is actually very much of a pure stillness, which is very much a masculine quality, right? The stillness. And this is a direct movement, even though it's still coming from a place of receptivity. As I'm taking this action, as I'm being the person who is doing this thing, it's still in the context of receptivity, because if it wasn't, I wouldn't be doing it. It wouldn't make sense, right? It would come from a different place. And so allowing myself to be moved. And for me, it really is. And this is why I talk a lot about this evolutionary leadership where we're operating from a place of, it's not so much about the feminine leadership or masculine. It's from the both. When we're operating already from the both and from the place where the both are together. And that can be a place of the both together because they've come together and we've woven them together, or we're operating from the origin place before they were separate, from almost this primordial mother place that birthed the two, right? And so there isn't that separation. And so it's okay, we can be in this receptive energy, allowing ourselves to be moved with an aspect of stillness, with an aspect of movement, with an aspect of surrendering and allowing, of being the vessel, but also simultaneously being the creator, because we're being the co-creator. Right? It's a bit of a jumbledness, but it's a handing over and allowing ourselves to be moved, which can be uncomfortable. And so that's just one example of receptivity and how it showed up for me in that context. And what I want to emphasize here is these movements can feel small and a little uncomfortable. Oh, okay, I'm sending a stranger-ish person a message asking them something that maybe doesn't make any sense. And then if they say yes, then I'm saying yes, and I'm committing to going on this trip, on this pilgrimage that I don't even know when it's going to happen or how it's going to happen, right? Still, it can feel a little small, but sometimes it's the receptive move is a huge move, right? And this for me is what I always go back to when I'm talking about the music and the miracle frequency, and how all of a sudden out of nowhere, I was a recording artist. What? Where did that even come from? There was no, it came from a place of pure receptivity because it wasn't even in the awareness, in the field of desires, in the vision boards of manifestation. It was pure receptiveness and allowing myself to be moved into different places I was invited to be moved to create such a thing, to be such a thing. And I'm not going to go into the full story there, but what I do want to share is that it's exactly a year since I released my album, which is called Resurrected. originally it was called something else. And in a state of receptive aha, at the last minute, it was changed to be called Resurrected. And I'm celebrating that. And so I want to just invite you. I am doing an event called Resurrected. It's called Resurrected, the experience, where it's part elevation, part activation, part initiation, part celebration, and inviting you to come in and celebrate that with me. And so that's in the links, and that's actually happening very, very soon. So you want to check that out and join me. And I wanted to mention that not just because I'm celebrating it right now, but because it came from a place of pure receptive leadership to a point where I am booking a trip to go record music because that is what I'm being guided to do without having any music to record, without ever having even so much as written a song, but because that's what I was guided to do, and I allowed myself to be moved to do that. And so that's a story for another day, right? I want to really just drive home this because sometimes in our receptivity, we are carried and moved to do big things. And so it's also a bit of that warrior energy, right? That's coming through, and a bit of that fire energy that's coming through, not a fire of I'm doing this thing, but that fire that's I'm allowing to move through me and put me in a place where I am doing this thing as a vessel and as a creator, even though it's wildly uncomfortable, even though it makes zero sense, even though it might be absolutely crazy to anybody who's watching. And those of you who know my stories and have been hanging around for a while know that so much of what I do is just crazy, right? But it's only crazy insofar as it's taken out of the context of being in a state of receptivity and being moved. All right, I'm going to pause there and just let you sit with this a little bit. What is my perception of receptivity and how I work with it and how I cultivate it in how I lead? What boxes or preconceptions do I have associated with it, with what it looks like, with what it feels like? Because if you're here, I know that you know receptivity is important. I know that it's something that you've already invested awareness and time to develop, right? And so this is just opening to that next level of what that looks like as somebody who already does the work, as somebody who maybe teaches the work, as somebody who embodies the work and shows others the way. What is this next level of receptivity that's there? And this is a theme that we're going to continue to explore, that I'm excited to have conversations with other amazing experts and receptivity mentors and leaders in this space to explore as well how they work with receptivity, what their rituals for receptivity are, and going behind the scenes and sharing those as well for others. And using that as a beautiful entryway into Miracle May, because when we are in that full receptivity and open to receiving, then the waterfall of miracles can just drop in resistance free. So check out Resurrected, the experience, and join me. And I'll see you on the next episode. Thank you for tuning in to the Miracle Zone. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a transmission. And if today's episode and conversation resonated, leave a review and share it with a fellow visionary leader. In the links, you can access my free Miracle Business Blueprint. the 7-part framework I use with my clients to create a thriving, scalable, and self-sustaining business that gives you more freedom, not less. Plus, you'll receive a guided process to identify where to focus first so you can spend more time leading in your miracle zone right away. Let's build the new as a collective for the collective. Together, we're not just creating miracles, we're living them. Until next time, stay in the miracle zone.